So after The Expanse debuted very strong with Leviathan Wakes, and kind of had a weak follow-up with Caliban's War, we can now move on to what is probably the best in the series, at least so far, Abaddon's Gate.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
Now, the thing about Abaddon's Gate is that it's not really action-packed and has a ton of plot points and plot twists or anything. So, normally I would say that it's, like, very, very good, just not the best, because some of the later books are way more action-packed, and they do have much more intricate plots and even better characters in some ways. But something about this one, like, the mystery and the horror aspects of it just elevate it way beyond what all the others have. Like, to me, this is almost perfect sci-fi. So, you can probably at least guess an idea of the general plot of this one if you've read the first two books. So, at the end of Caliban's War, the proto-molecule finally left Venus, and it formed a giant gate just way out at the edges of the solar system, and most people are just staying far away from it. They have military blockades set up and everything, and in the prologue, some idiot goes through it, and it activates the gate, and turns out, surprise, surprise, it's a wormhole, and it takes them to this giant space station, which was actually built by the people that made the proto-molecule, or people that made the proto-molecule. They don't actually see any living things at first, but then they're just like, okay, well, shit, we gotta go in and investigate. And so, yeah, Holden goes in and investigates, along with representatives from Earth, Mars, and the OPA, and they're all just basically interacting with each other, trying to avoid starting a war and killing each other, but also they're looking at, like, oh shit, this is like ancient alien technology that's literally billions of years old, and it still works, and it's far beyond anything we have, and we don't know what happened to the people that made it. And just the thing that really got this book is that, and the series in general, I don't think I've mentioned this, is just how it makes not only the individuals, but all of humanity just feel so, so small. Both in just, you look out at the whole universe and you realize how small we are, and also you look at time and realize how short of amount of time we've existed. Because, again, the people that made the proto-molecule made it billions of years ago, and it is several billion years from now, none of the things that humans have made will likely have any traces left. Or there might be a couple traces, I'm not totally sure. But there's no way our technology will work or anything. This is the first book where you actually find out anything about the proto-molecule and the people that made it. And that alone elevates this beyond the first two. Because while they did a good job of building up and setting up the mystery, just actually getting to see that is phenomenally satisfying. And we don't know everything yet, but we do have some ideas after reading this. Plot-wise, I don't want to go into too much more detail, because, you know, you already have a general idea of it. This one, I just like to say, it's good because it has a complete arc around it. You know, it's not... and actually every book in this series so far, with the exception of Nemesis games, has a complete story arc, and it doesn't really have a cliffhanger where you only finish half the story. You know, Leviathan Wakes had a bit of a cliffhanger, Caliban's War had a huge cliffhanger, but they were still, you know, just semi-self-contained stories. So that's very good. This one has that, and from that you can get a general idea of what it's going to be about. It's good, but I don't want to go into a whole bunch of detail about it. Something else that stands out but is also kind of disappointing is the character cast, because, you know, we have the same core characters as before. You know, Holden is still the main one that we spend all our time with. But with this series, other than Holden, every book has had different POV characters. Like, in this one, we don't get any point-of-view chapters from Avasarala, Praxidike, or Bobby. And I'm okay not really having Praxidike around anymore. You know, he was good, but he's also kind of served his purpose in the story at this point. But I really liked Bobby, and I really like Avasarala. And it disappoints me that we don't really get to see all that much of them in this one. Like, I mean, it might sound kind of silly, but I do just find myself wishing that Bobby had joined the crew of the Rocinante at the end of Caliban's War. But whatever, it's not really the end of the world, because it's not like she's gone. Like, minor spoilers, she does show up more later. Just, it does disappoint me. However, the characters in this are overall pretty good. You know, there's 3 new ones. There's Bull, there's Anna, and there's Clarissa. Now, Bull is fine. He has, you know, he has his own backstory. He's got personality. He's fine. There's nothing really that I feel like mentioning about him. Anna's interesting. She's a religious pastor. Well, okay, obviously she's religious if she's a pastor, but you know, she's a pastor and she has some interesting views on religion, I meant to say. And she's not totally useless or anything. She's more than just an observer. And some of her ideas and her personality they're actually pretty interesting. So she's good, but I'm also glad they mostly pushed her by the wayside after this one. And the third one is Clarissa. And without going into too much detail, because I really don't want to spoil anything about her, she is the first villain in the series that is actually legitimately very good. Like, because before this, we haven't really had any villains that are particularly interesting. Like, we had Jules Pierre Mao, who was just kind of in the background. Then we had that head scientist at Thoth that was in charge of the proto-molecule research, and he's the one that killed Eros. And he was kind of interesting, but he was only around for a little bit, so there was not much to say about him. Whereas Clarissa comes in, and she's actually very, very good. I refuse to spoil anything beyond that. Overall, not much else to say. This one is by far my favorite out of the series so far. Well, not by far, but it is my favorite out of the series so far. And the main reason for that is not really because of the story or characters or anything. It's more about just the feeling of smallness, the feeling of oppressiveness, and just the horrifying ideas of what's going on. Because without going into detail, it really is scary. This is more of a horror book than sci-fi at some points, but it works extremely, extremely well.